Zat Hashem, today in Masechet Ta'anit, we're holding in Gimel Amud Bet 13b. Towards the top of the page, Lema Misayeh Alei. Lema Misayeh Alei is the fifth line on the page.
Lema Misayeh is like another reason?
A proof.
Proof.
Si'ua, like Si'ua.
Like another explanation.
Raya.
Yeah.
So, but let's just remember where we're holding, because we're in the middle of a sugya a little bit here. We have had so far two main opinions. We have Rav Bar Papa Amar Rav Chizda, and then we had the opinion of Rava. So let's remember the opinions, and then we'll go ahead. First opinion was Rav Bar Papa Amar Rav Chizda. What did he say? Let me just see. It's fine. It's good. Is it bothering you? Is it in the way? Perfect. So, what did Rav Bar Papa Amar Rav Chizda hold? He said, no, remember what he said? The first opinion we had.
He said that if it's a tinus because of velus, you don't use cold nor hot.
Or if it's just a velut, right? Yeah. But
if it's a tanug, then you can do it cold.
Excellent. And we brought questions and proofs, but that was his position. Rav Bar Papa Amar Rav Chizda. Then we had Rava. This is Rava version 1, by the way, because we're going to see an Ikeda Amri of Rava today, a second version. But first version of Rava said, he argued on the point of Avelut. He said, Avelut is mutar betzonen. He's allowed to wash in cold. We brought a question the other time. Now we're bringing a proof to Rava. Now this proof...
He did say about the tinus.
Correct. Only Avelut. This is specific Avelut. Exactly. So the Gemara now tries to bring a proof from something that we learned before. Lema Misayeh Alei. Let's bring a proof to Rava. The Amar Rabbi Abba Kohen Mishum Rabbi Yossi Kohen, because Rabbi Abba Kohen said in the name of Rabbi Yossi Kohen. Said there was a story. Umetu banav shel Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina. We quoted this before. The sons of Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina died. Verachatz betzonen kol shiv'ah, and he washed in cold water all 7 days. So the Gemara says, what do you see? He was an Avel. But hold on. Before the Pircha, but you see he was an Avel, and you see he was washing in cold. So you see an Avel could wash in cold. So that's a proof. And what's the answer? It's not a proof.
Was the second week, a week after that the first son died.
Exactly.
The second son died, lo alenu, and
exactly.
Then he got like heter
exactly.
to take to the Chotz Betzonen, because it was already like
too long.
It was too long already for 7 days.
Exactly. So the Gemara says not a proof. Amri, so they responded, like we said before, that was a scenario where he had subsequent avelut periods, that there was one period after another, 2 sons died, lo aleinu. The Tanya, like the Braita teaches, tachvu avelav zachazef, there's subsequent avelut periods, ichbid saro mekil beta'ar. If his hair becomes heavy, he's allowed to cut it with a razor. Literally means make it lighter with a razor. We said not to cut it in the normal way, but to cut it with a razor. And he can wash his garments in water. He can wash his clothing in water. Amar Rav Chizda explained, and we quoted all of this on the previous Amud. He could cut it with a razor, but not with scissors. And he can wash his clothing in water. Velo beneter, velo bechol, velo beohel. You can't wash it with neter, with chol, and ohel. These are 3 types of, I think it might be translated as aloe. Again, it's some sort of a detergent. I don't know what they translate it as, but...
Because we get ohel,
ohel, what is it translated as?
It's wandering, it's a type of plant substance.
Maybe it might be aloe, I don't know. But anyways, you can't use the detergent, you can only use water. But what's the point? We see when it's tachvu avelav, there's an extended period like this, there's leniency. So too, he could wash in cold. But a normal avel maybe can't wash in cold, so you don't have any proof. Now this is the first version of Rava, and according to this version of Rava, an Avel is allowed to wash in cold, but the second version of Rava disagrees. Now let's remember, why did Rava say an Avel could wash in cold? He said, Midi dahava, remember we said the same thing like meat and wine. We said just like meat and wine. Rava, the first version of Rava. He said, just like meat and wine, a mourner is allowed to eat and drink, also he's allowed to wash in cold. That was the comparison that he made. Seemingly, the comparison is, it's a similar level of pleasure. So if you can eat meat and drink wine, you're also allowed to take a cold shower. Fine. Ikeda Amri. Now there was another version of Rava, which was not the same. Amar Rava says, Avel, when it comes to a mourner, Asur bitzonen kol shiv'ah, he is prohibited. It's asur for him to wash all 7 days. My shnami basar v'yayin. So in this version, actually, it's a question. My shnami basar v'yayin. What is the difference between washing in cold versus meat and wine? It's a very interesting thing. Meaning meat and wine he's allowed to eat and drink, but he's not allowed to wash in cold. What's the difference? The Gemara answers, Hatam, this is a very interesting logic, but Hatam there, regarding meat and wine, lepakuche pachte huda avid, to lessen his anxiety, it is being done. Eating meat and drinking wine is permitted because it's allowed to quell his anxiety, to calm his anxiety, his worry, his stress. Eating meat and drinking wine, it makes him less stressed out. So that's permitted. But taking a cold shower, it doesn't accomplish the same thing.
And if it's the opposite?
But what the Gemara, so what the Gemara is saying is, according to this version, he's allowed to eat meat and drink wine because he needs a little bit of a stress relief. So he's allowed. But taking a cold shower doesn't accomplish that, so therefore he's not allowed to take a cold shower. This is the second version. Now you could argue this.
This is like a strong proof?
I would say personally happens to be. When I don't take a shower, I feel very
stingy.
I feel very dirty. I feel very stressed. Like I don't feel comfortable about that. On Tisha B'Av, I think what's the hardest thing for you on Tisha B'Av? The hardest thing.
Wash my mouth.
I agree, by the way. I agree. Not brushing my teeth in the morning is very hard for me.
Yes. Wash my mouth.
Washing my body also. Washing my hands properly.
It's not the food, it's not the
it doesn't bother the most. Not at all, right? So for me personally, but the Gemara says, no. When it comes to meat and wine, that lessens his stress. Taking a cold shower, it doesn't. So he's not allowed to take a cold shower, but he is allowed to eat meat and drink wine. That's what the Gemara says. I also wonder, just to think about it.
Who's saying this?
The Gemara. This is the Rava version 2. The Gemara is explaining Rava version 2.
Rava 2.0.
Exactly.
Rava said that anytime you could have meat and wine, you could go in cold water.
In version 1. Version 2, he's saying no. He's saying it's true you could eat meat and drink wine, and Avel could eat meat and drink wine, but he's not allowed to take a cold shower. What's the difference? Because that's a stress relief, and this doesn't accomplish
But how come that Rava can say that if Avel in Tisha B'Av, Mishenichas Av B'Ma'atim B'Simcha, and one of the Isurim is yain and meat, and which is like we are mourning for the Churban of Bet HaMikdash. So what is the difference with the regular mourner, which is somebody passed away for him?
Okay, that's an interesting question. What would be the difference? That's a good question.
If this is Avelut and this is Avelut.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying.
The halachot are pretty equal, no?
In this regard, it does not seem to be equal. These are not equal. You're right. Meat and wine are restrictions when it comes to Tisha B'Av, but it's not a restriction for an Avel, as we're saying.
But what happens if a person don't like to eat meat and drink wine?
Well, then it doesn't really help him to relieve stress. I guess that's yeah.
Well, some people they are like forbidden to eat meat or Nazir for
vegetarian. I don't know. I mean, we're saying normal people, regular people.
No, I understand, but the only difference here is just a shower.
That's just saying kosher.
But what is the chumrah about the shower so much? Like, because you're allowed, usually...
It is an interesting question.
A minhag of simcha is more than the meat and wine.
Matan's asking a very interesting question. Meaning, in general, why would we say... To have pleasure, I understand, that's a hot shower, I get it, to refrain from that during Avelut. But what would be the logic in also prohibiting cold shower? Rav and Bar Papa held this way, by the way, but what's the logic in that ultimately? It's a good question. I think it's a fair question. But what's the pshat practically?
Maybe the olden days they didn't have hygienic stuff. Like
that's what I was going to say. That's why probably it stresses me out more than it stressed them out. They used to shower once a week or once a month. That was normal. So it could be in those generations, not to take a cold shower, it's not such a big deal. It doesn't bother them so much because they're used to that pretty much. For me that I shower every day, maybe twice a day in the summer, whatever it is, to not take a shower becomes much worse. It becomes much more bothersome.
Okay.
I wonder if that changes the dynamic a little bit. It's possible it changes the dynamic. Also, brushing our teeth. We brush our teeth every day, twice a day, whatever it is. If we don't brush our teeth one day, it bothers us very much. There's differences based on levels of hygiene. That's why they also used to lose their teeth when they were 30 years old, because of the... it wasn't... Anyways, that's the Shita of Rava. Let's continue. Now, what we're going to do here is, we're going to go through the same steps that we went through in the last version, but in the opposite. Because...
So this time he says, Usher can't do cold water all the days.
Avel cannot wash in cold water.
But he could have meat.
Meat and wine. Meat and wine, we're saying in Avel is mutar. The only question is cold water the same as that? First version says it's the same. And the second version says it's not the
I
same.
wonder if today it's allowed for Avel. Shower I know that they don't take, but I wonder if
Cold shower?
allowed to take meat and
Meat and wine? We can look it up after. Yeah. I think they could.
I know that they eat some meat, but I don't see. I don't know about wine.
Actually, yeah, and it's true. No, they do.
Meat.
No, I think they do, because we have the whole concept the Gemara talks about in the Beit Havel. They used to have a certain number of cups of wine. I think it's
Yeah.
Gemara in Ketuvot, I believe, talks about that.
Interesting. Okay.
Maybe not getting drunk.
Maybe getting drunk.
Getting drunk is
Maybe,
stress,
yeah.
right?
We just spoke about it on Shabbat, actually. There is a concept of
Today we spoke about it.
Tenu sheichar lemare nafesh. There is such a concept, and Psukim talk about it.
What's your number?
Give wine to the bitter-hearted. There is such a concept, actually.
Yain is samach levaveno.
Yeah, there is such a concept. I mean, the Orchot Tzadikim. We learned the Orchot Tzadikim on Shabbat. We went through it briefly.
I learned it with my
it's a very interesting Orchot Tzadikim where he talks. This is off topic, but he talks about how it's appropriate to use wine if a person's a little bit stressed out, just to calm his mind, so he could be mechazek in his Torah study, in his tefillah, in his avodat Hashem. Because he said, as long as you're stressed out, you can't focus, you can't do the things you need to. So a person needs a little bit just to calm his mind. It's acceptable. I just added in. I don't think he means that it should become a dependency or an addiction, chas v'shalom, because that's already a problem, and that's a different issue. But I'd imagine he's saying a person that gets home from work, he's a little stressed out, have a little bit of wine, he's not gonna, hopefully it doesn't become addicted to that. A little
It's a
bit.
common thing.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't think it's anything.
It's also healthy to drink 1 cup of wine.
You talk about those studies, I don't
No,
know.
the wine of those days was very strong.
No, but they say, look, probably because it decreases your stress.
Right.
You know?
Stress kills. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Okay, let's go. Let's go ahead, Yocheved. We're going to go through the same proofs, but backwards now, because essentially it's the opposite shita. So let's go through the same steps now. Very easy. Let's bring a proof to Rava version 2. The Braita says, we quoted this in the top of the page, that a bogeret, which is a girl of marriageable age, is not allowed to allow herself to become ugly, unkempt, in her avelut of her father. So what does that imply? Ha na'ara rasha, but it sounds like a girl who's not marriageable age, which is a na'ara. She is allowed to become unkempt, to become ugly. So the Gemara... No, bogeret is. Na'ara is not.
Na'ara is 12.
Na'ara and Ketana could, but it's not necessarily encouraged. It's possible, but it's not necessarily encouraged. Tana could also get married, by the way, theoretically, if her father wants her to. But bogeret is considered physically mature enough; she can make her own decisions, etc. So the Gemara says, "B'mai, when is a bogeret when is a bogeret not allowed to become ugly, and the nara is allowed to become ugly?" So we're assuming it means in terms of washing. If it talks about washing in hot water, so then what you're saying is bogeret can't wash in hot water, and an nara could wash. Sorry, the opposite. Bogeret could wash in hot water, and an nara cannot wash in hot water. That's what it would be saying. The problem is, Rav Chisda said an avel can't even put his finger in hot water. So it can't be saying bogeret could wash in hot water. That doesn't make sense.
It says betach buso.
Well, that's the next thing we see. That's elolav. So it must be what's pshat in the Braita. Bitzonen. It must be it's saying that a bogeret is allowed to wash in cold water, and an nara is not allowed to wash in cold water, because during normal avilut you're not allowed to wash in cold water. So this is a proof to Rava. Beautiful. That an avel is asur in cold water. Just because she's a bogeret, she's marriageable age, she's allowed to.
But the conclusion was that it's not about...
It's the same steps. We're just now bringing it as a proof or a question depending on what the version is. So the Gemara says, lo, that's not a proof. Exactly like you said. No, this is not talking about washing. Perhaps washing is mutar in cold. We're not bringing a proof to that. This is talking about makeup and braiding the hair. Those things that bogeret is allowed to do, na'ara is not allowed to do, but you can't bring a proof to Rava from this Braita. Let's go to the next proof. The same, this is, the next thing is a different story, but yeah.
So far, we're holding it what? The version of, the first version of Rava is the right one?
We have 3 shitot so far.
Rava and Bapapa.
1, Rava 1 and Rava 2.
Rava, okay.
So what do we have?
Rava 1 is basically, you're allowed to take a shower in cold water. And Rava 2 is no shower.
Avel is allowed to shower in cold
But you're
water.
allowed to eat meat and wine.
Correct. That's version 2. We tried to bring a proof. The proof was rejected because it's talking about kichur pirkos.
Rava 1 is you can go in a cold shower.
Avel can go in a cold shower.
What's Rava 2?
An Avel cannot go in a cold shower.
That's the only difference.
That's the chiluk between them. Exactly. Okay, now we're going to finish off the sugya. We're going to wrap this up here. Let's see. Amar Av Chizda says Av Chizda. Zot omeret. This teaches us. Now the way Rashi learns this, Zot omeret means if the Gemara is saying that a girl during Avelut is not allowed to put makeup and to braid her hair, okay, because of the Avelut. So Zot omeret, this would teach us she's not allowed, other than Bogeret, it's an exception, but normally a person is not allowed to put makeup, keep their hair braided. They're not allowed to look well kept, well groomed. So based on that, says Rav Chizda, this teaches us Avel asor b'tachboset kol shiv'ah, that an Avel is not allowed to wash his clothing all 7 days. So Rav Chizda is making a dimyon, a comparison. He's saying if you're not allowed to have makeup and braid her hair, because it makes you look presentable, you're also not allowed to wash your clothing during the 7 days of Shiv'ah. That's what he's saying. Tichboset is also asur. Vehilchetan, the Gemara says, what is the halacha? Avel asur lerchot kol gufo, bein bechamin, bein betzonin. An Avel is not allowed to wash his body in hot or cold water. Kol Shiv'ah, for all of the 7 days. Aval panav yadav veraglav, but regarding his face, hands, and feet, bechamin asur, betzonen mutar. So regarding his face, his hands, and his feet, in hot is prohibited, it's asur, but in cold water, it's permitted. So what do we just paskin? Let's just speak that out. An Avel is not allowed to wash his whole body in hot or cold.
Like Rafram Bar Papa.
Like Rafram Bar Papa, and also like Rava. The second, Rava 2. But he could wash Hanav Yadav Raglav in cold water. Exactly, that's the Psak Gemara says. Ava, but let's finish this off. Ava lasuch, but to anoint, to put on creams or oils, things like that. Afilu kol shu asur. During Shiv'ah, it's even asur in a small amount. Ve'im la'averet azuama, but if it's to remove zuama is like a bad smell. It becomes smelly. If it's just to remove, like deodorant, basically. If it's to use as a deodorizer, as deodorant, meaning it's not to enhance.
Like a sanitizer? Like
a sanitizer. It's not to enhance, but it's just to put some oil to take away a bad smell. So in such a case, mutar, that would be permissible. No, this is bichlal. By the way, this is nogea, because in Tisha B'Av, you're not allowed to put on cream or perfume, but you could put on deodorant. It's a deodorizer. It's to la'avir et hazuama. You're going to remove a bad smell, so it's permitted. The pashtut, it's permitted. The pashtut. But the point is, what comes out here is, what's the psak we're coming out? The psak is not like Rava version 1. The psak is like Rava version 2. Avel is asur in washing kol gufo, whole body, in hot or cold. Yadav panav raglav, his hands, his face, and his feet, in sonen. And anointing is allowed only la'avir tazuama, to remove a bad smell. Okay, that's the psak. The Gemara comes out. The next sugya is a completely new sugya. God willing, we'll start that next sugya tomorrow. Ezat Hashem. That's the end of this sugya.
In Avelut, you're allowed to take a shower, no?
So the way we just paskind in the Gemara, we have to figure this out.
No,
the Gemara says you're not, an Avel is not allowed to take a shower in hot or cold.
No, I understand.
His whole body.
Yeah.
But panav yadav raglav is permitted cold water. Now we want to know halacha l'maaseh. It's kedai to look this up because I am curious about this.
I think it's the same thing.
You think it's asur for Avel kol shiva?
I just think, because it's just like, Gabi Raz, it just finishes Avelut today.
No, and?
A guy that davened with us. And he didn't take a shower.
He didn't take a shower.
And he said, just like, cold water or something.
Yeah, we can look it up. We'll look it up after.
But I think that Avelut also, they don't take a shower.
Avelut, not even cold. That's what the Gemara seems to paskin. We have to look it up though. It's kedai to look it up. I do see that seems to be the psak here.
I know about the clothing, that you're not allowed to change your clothing and all that stuff.
Right.
And it's uncomfortable, but shower.
Look it up. Zat Hashem, we'll look it up after. Okay, let's stop here. We'll do Chazara, and tomorrow night we'll pick up with a new sugya. God willing, it's about the prayers of a fast day. It's a new sugya.
Be'ezrat Hashem.
Zat Hashem.